Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports from our Pontchartrain Production Studios. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we cover all the home teams. Saints, Pelicans, LSU, Tulane, UNO. We'll cover it all. And we have award-winning journalists with us tonight. Les East of CrescentCitySports.com and so much more. And Brett Martel of the Associated Press are on our panel. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. And award-winning journalist. This might be a first, having both you guys on at the same time. Thanks for coming down. Appreciate it. We'd like to start off telling the audience a little bit about what you guys are involved in. If you would, why don't you start us off, Les?
Okay, thanks, Eric. I am writing for CrescentCitySports.com, cover a little bit of everything over there, and covering LSU for SaturdayDownSouth.com, transitioning from football to basketball and maybe a little baseball here before long. So those are the main things keeping me busy right now.
Always good to have you. Thanks for coming down.
Good to be back.
Brett, welcome back. Good to have you back. Would you tell us about the Associated Press?
Good to be back. First, I want to mention Les wrote a really good retrospective on minor league baseball in New Orleans that I would recommend reading.
Right.
It's probably still live on the website,
Easily
right
accessible.
Right around the last time that the Baby Cakes, formerly Zephyrs, played. So. Anyway, yeah, with AP, obviously it's based in New York City, covers the world, and I'm kind of the correspondent to the world from New Orleans for sports, especially with the Saints and the Pelicans and LSU and any other major thing going on.
Good to have you back.
Yeah.
We weren't going to go there, but let's go there for a second because the Gold have taken over the Shrine on Airlines, now the Gold Mine on Airline, the rugby team. There's been discussion on my colleague Corey Johnson's show about the possibility of maybe building a downtown stadium somewhere and bringing minor league baseball back. Any minor league baseball team that would come to New Orleans would have to probably come from the Southern League. So you're probably taking a team from the Southern League that, which might be difficult to do. And then on the flip side, you'd have to put money into the old Zephyr Stadium on Airline unless you'd have local ownership that was committed to be able to build a stadium on their own, which I got to figure is kind of doubtful at this point. Do you think we'll see Major League Baseball back here in the next decade? I'm sorry, minor league baseball here back in the next decade?
Well, it's possible, but my understanding is it will not happen without significant improvements to the stadium. And right now there doesn't seem to be much of an interest in the LSED to get that done.
Right.
You don't have the political connections between potential ownership and the LSED and the legislature that you had back when the stadium opened.
Yes.
So something's going to have to come forward, or someone's going to have to come forward and jumpstart that if those renovations are going to get done. It could happen, but I think obviously it's not going to happen for 2020, and I don't think it's going to happen for 2021. Hopefully something happens here in the not too distant future and we can get a team back. But one thing just to mention about the rugby team, I think there's going to be an announcement next week about an affiliation with that group that might be interesting, but I don't think I'm at liberty to release details at this point.
Yes.
But about a week from now, actually less than a week from now, I think there'll be some announcement.
Brett, what do you think? You think we'll see it back here in New Orleans anytime soon?
Not that optimistic, only because my conversations have led me to believe that a lot of people think it's difficult for whatever reason for minor league baseball to be profitable here. It's more of a headache than it's worth. I would personally disagree because baseball is a labor of love for a lot of people, especially at the minor league level. But when you look at the trends of Major League Baseball pushing to cut the number of minor league affiliates, combined with the condition of the stadium, that team leaving, I don't see a lot of interest on the part of the Saints right now to get involved in baseball at all. I think they've got their hands full with 2 major league teams in Dixie Brewery and a racing stable.
Right.
So, I mean, as a person who grew up playing baseball and loves baseball, I'd like to see it, but I guess we can't always get what we want.
Right. Well, I mean, look, when the Zephyrs first got here, there was a lot of people that were interested in it. It was a kind of a go-to thing during the summertime. Obviously, you had arena football come in for a while. The Pelicans is really kind of, well, let's say the Hornets really is what kind of stymied that. Again, and it goes back to the sports dollar. Can the sports dollar stretch enough to be able to include minor league baseball in New Orleans? Especially in a post-Katrina New Orleans.
And also sponsorships.
Yes.
The same thing. When the NBA came here, you remember there was that full court press to sell sponsorships and season tickets in order to convince the NBA to approve the move. And so a lot of people had to make a choice. Do I commit to this NBA team so we can get it, or do I stay with the minor league baseball team? And that was a severe blow to the baseball team, and that's going to be a problem for anybody else who tries to come in here. And I think that's a good point about the movement afoot to scale back on minor league baseball is another factor. So it doesn't look good for the short term, but hopefully something happens here over the next couple of years that changes that.
Well, the Pelicans are looking good. And again, that's changed from obviously what happened in the beginning of the season, the 13-game losing streak, starting obviously with starting 6-22. They are 25-33 now. They're 19-11 over their last 27. They're 6-4 over their last 10. There's 24 games left. 13 of those games are at home. They're 11-17 at home. That West Coast swing, they did pretty well. They won 2, lost 1. They beat Portland, beat Golden State, lost to the Lakers. They got Cleveland in the Smoothie King Center on Friday, and then a nationally televised game against the Los Angeles Lakers on Sunday. Pelicans have the easiest road to the playoffs right now. They are they're 3 games back of the 8th seed, and they have 18 of their 24 games left with teams that are below 500. On the other side, Memphis has the toughest schedule in the NBA, and they've suffered multiple injuries that have hurt them. Portland has Damian Lillard out. They have the 25th toughest schedule. And, of course, San Antonio right behind the Pelicans, and right behind them, Sacramento kind of breathing down their neck as well. Pelicans look like they're in a pretty good position right now to make a run for the playoffs based on what they've been doing really since the 13-game losing streak, but especially since Zion has come back on.
Yeah, I would say there are 6 teams fighting for one spot. And if you asked me to pick the favorite among those 6 teams, I'd pick the Pelicans. For one reason, you mentioned the weakest schedule. They have the most upside, because they just added a guy who's averaging 20 points plus and 8 or so rebounds a game in Zion Williamson. They're the healthiest they've been all year. All of that's coming together. They should improve more than any other team in that group, I think, down the stretch. They have the easiest schedule, and they, I just think, have the best combination of factors in their favor. And a lot of teams have injuries. We just saw earlier today Kelly Oubre Jr. for the Suns, who's having a career year. He has torn meniscus apparently in his knee. I think Sacramento would be the team I would keep an eye on. They're 3-0 since the break. They play Oklahoma City on the road tonight. That'll be a good test for them. But they've won something like 7 of their last 10, I think. And the 3 losses were against elite teams. So I would keep an eye on Sacramento. But I think the Pelicans, to me, are the favorite, but you have 6 teams within, I believe, 4.5 games.
Right. What's your thoughts, Brett? You like the Pelicans' chances here?
I think they're pretty solid as long as they trend in the right direction in terms of health. Chemistry, they should, because, I mean, people forget, too, earlier in the year they not only were hurt and had constantly changing lineups, but half the roster were new players that were getting used to playing together. Lonzo Ball was still trying to refine his new shooting motion, which seems to be a lot better now. You know, Brandon Ingram obviously has really come into his own. But if you look at the way the Pelicans have played over that stretch you mentioned earlier, it seems like they're not really laying eggs against mediocre to bad teams anymore.
Right.
They're only losing to teams like the Lakers, and even on the road they're able to beat a lot of teams. Even able to overcome bad quarters and win games, which is something they weren't able to do earlier in the year and something they struggled to do in recent seasons. So yeah, they have a lot of hope, but still, you know, I mean, 24 games left, I think, and a 3-game hole you mentioned. So we'll see, but it's certainly going to be interesting. I mean, there should be a lot of urgency going into this next stretch of games, and the first half of March at least should be pretty good drama.
Majority of the games in March at home, that helps, even though, again, they haven't played well at home, as I mentioned, 11-17 at home. They've been one of the better road teams this year. And when you look at them right now, based on what we've seen since the losing streak, like I said, over the last 27 games, 19-11, I think they're in the top 5 or 6 of NBA teams right now. If you were to just look at just based on that small sample size, that they're playing as good as anybody right now in the NBA.
Yeah, they are, and that's why I think they're a team whose record probably isn't the best indicator of their prospects for making the playoffs, because the team that they are right now is much different than the team they were before Derek Favors came back, which made a huge difference, and certainly the team before Zion Williamson joined them. He's just been remarkable, I think better than advertised. And you know, down the stretch, the last dozen or so games, I think only one of them is against a team with a winning record, and that's Philadelphia, which currently has 2 starters hurt and hasn't been a very good road team even when they've been healthy. So the schedule sets up excellent for them. They're 3 behind Memphis, but they play Memphis twice. They've already beaten them twice. Memphis is beat up. So it just lays out, I think they have a great opportunity, but you know, it's up to them to take advantage of it. They can't just not show up for some game. Like the first half at Golden State, they can't have games like that. So we'll see, but it's a great opportunity for them.
As you mentioned, 3 more games against San Antonio. You mentioned 2 more against Memphis. They swept the season series against Portland. So they're in a pretty good position right now going down the stretch here.
Yeah, and it's funny, what everyone's talking about now, that you mentioned Favors, you know, when they do play really good teams and lose, like they did at LA, people are starting to look at how they're being defended with Favors and Zion on the court at the same time. And after practice today, Favors was being asked a lot about spacing, and he was saying that that when he was playing with Rudy Gobert, he had to get out closer to the three-point line a lot and set screens to create a little more space inside, as well as options for perimeter shooters coming off the screens that he's setting. And he's kind of mentioning today that he may have to do some of the same things going forward when he's on the floor with Zion. We'll, you know, have to see how that adjustment goes, and if they're comfortable with it, then it should make them even more competitive. So give them more options with the lineups.
When those guys are on the floor together, they're playing really good basketball, and again, obviously dominating the inside in terms of rebounds, offensive rebounds. They're scoring around the basket. This team, which started the season being a team that was going outside in, is now an inside-out team, which is again how they were really built, even though that kind of goes away from what the NBA is doing now. But again, it sets up the shooters that they've brought in, that they've imported this year, when you can have a strong inside game, like what you're getting out of Zion and Favors. And look, they are physical when those 2 guys are on the floor together.
And I think another aspect of that is when Favors goes out and they put Nico Melli in there, they have the inside-outside combination. Zion gets so much attention on the low block. Melli's getting better looks from the outside, which is why he has shot so much better on threes, along with, I think, becoming more comfortable during his first NBA season. So they have a different dynamic when Melli comes in, and I think that's probably why Jackson Hayes' minutes have diminished here a little bit the last few games, but that'll vary depending on matchups. So, yeah, they have a real problem for opponents inside when they have Favors and Williamson in there, but they have a different problem when they put Melly in instead of Favor. So it gives Alvin Gentry a lot of options.
And to Les's point, not only is Melly shooting the ball well, he's playing really good defense. He has become a much better defender the back end of the season than he was earlier in the year, where he was still trying to adjust to the NBA. I mean, you watch him; he is technically sound in terms of how he's playing defense now.
Yeah, well, he's an experienced pro, and I think it's just a matter of getting used to just not only a new team but the style of play in the league. But his adaptability, I mean, it was bound to be a quicker learning curve than a rookie coming out of college. And yeah, it's a good sign. We hadn't mentioned yet that Nickeil Alexander-Walker is being sent down, if you will, I guess. But in a way, I don't think that's a bad thing for Nickeil. I think it's a good sign that the team is playing so well. They're having trouble getting him minutes, but they really believe in his future and they want him playing. And so he's going down. But yeah, I expected Melly to kind of get it, the mental aspect of the game, faster, and all the things that we've mentioned, have made him more effective.
Right, and Didi Lozada's playing really well in Australia right now, averaging double figures. So again, that's a guy they've stashed that they're going to bring back next season. There'll be a log. If you thought it was a log jam before at the guard position, there's a log jam now, and I agree with you. At this point, he's not getting playing time. He's been around the team enough. If they make it to the playoffs, he's coming back up anyway, at least to be on that bench. So it gives him an opportunity to get down and start playing, which was one of the things I think they had to weigh early in the season with the Jackson Hayes and Nickeil Alexander-Walker on, again, were they going to have those guys on the bench and learning from the pros and getting an NBA experience, or were they going to send them down to the G League and allow them to play a full season in the G League where they can get better? They've kind of had the best of both worlds because those guys have gotten playing time, they've been around the system, and they've been around the pros that, again, they imported in that were supposed to drive the culture here.
Yeah, and I think getting him playing time now is extremely important because he hasn't been getting that of late, although I'm not sure this is a long-term thing. He can be back here pretty soon because the schedule is so condensed right now. I think they're going to have to start going a little bit deeper in the rotation from time to time to keep guys fresh. And Jackson Hayes will probably benefit from that as well coming up. But for the time being, I think playing time, I think they did this with Frank Jackson for a brief period of time last year. So getting those minutes at any level, I think, is going to be helpful to Alexander Walker. But we probably haven't seen the last of him in New Orleans for this year. And
look, they mentioned Jackson. He's lost in the rotation as well right now. And he's a guy, when he gets an opportunity to get on the floor, with decent minutes, he's been able to produce.
Yeah, and he's a really exciting player too, especially above the rim. I think that the only thing with him is that, he probably misses some assignments every now and then on the defensive end, as rookies tend to do. And so, he's got to become more reliable from the mental standpoint. That's not really a knock on him so much as probably pretty common for his level of experience.
Right. Guys, looking back now at this Anthony Davis trade, and look, there's so much more in the future that we'll have to look forward to here in New Orleans because of the draft picks and the draft swaps. But again, the ability now for the three Lakers, former Lakers, to come in, Ingram, Ball, and also Hart, to be able to elevate their game with the playing time. All three guys are comfortable now. I could not envision this team where they would be right now without Josh Hart and what he's been able to do off the bench. Brandon Ingram is an all-star. And slowly but surely, Ball is kind of rounding into shape as the point guard I think a lot of us thought he would be, especially now with Zion on the floor where they can kind of play above the rim. The one knock on Ball, which again has been consistent throughout the season, is he's just a little too casual with the basketball, with the turnovers. And if you're going to be a point guard, you've really got to be able to watch the turnovers. Having the same situation with Drew Holiday when he handles the ball a little bit too much as well with the turnovers. But other than that, when I was one that was in favor of the Boston trade, based on what we're seeing from some of those Boston guys out there. But you can look at it based on what they're doing right now. Either one at this point, in hindsight, would have been a good deal. And this deal looks like a really good deal that Griff put together for the Pelicans now and in the future.
Yeah, it does. And I think all three of those players came here under similar circumstances in that the Pelicans were hoping they were all ready to take another step. And they had all had ups and downs in Los Angeles for a lot of reasons, injuries being a big part of it, especially for Ingram and Ball. And I think in all three cases, they have become what the Pelicans had hoped they would be, but couldn't be sure they would be when they made the trade. And Ingram has been much more consistent, although he had started to show signs of that last year before he got hurt. Lonzo Ball has come farther, I think, from the beginning of the season to now than any other player on the team, partly because he was hurt early in the season, and Josh Hart's just been a glue player from the beginning.
Yes.
He's really, I think he's going to be a solid, important player whose value exceeds his statistics.
Yeah. Your thoughts on the former Lakers?
Yeah, first, Josh Hart is a real fighter. I didn't realize how much intensity he would bring, and that can be really important coming off the bench. He plays with a lot of confidence and a lot of intensity, and he's been very productive in spurts. Ball, I agree. You know, he is a little casual sometimes with the ball handling and turns the ball over, much like Holiday. And I'm not sure, you know, that in the Gentry era, Gentry treats these guys like pros. To some extent, it seems like he expects them to recognize their shortcomings and address them on their own.
Yes.
You know, or go get help from the assistant without having to do it in a punitive way. You know, because I think he wants to have his stars continue to be happy and play with confidence. And so I don't know. I mean, with DeMarcus Cousins, you know, it never got better with the turnovers, and with Drew, sometimes it's bad, but it hasn't really, you know, it hasn't consistently improved. Right. And I don't know when it will with Ball, but there's a lot of joy in Ball's game now, kind of, you know.
Yeah.
It just seems to be, he exudes a love for basketball again, and the way he brings the ball up the floor and some of the passes and plays he makes. And I think that has an intangible, energizing effect on the team, too.
And you know, speaking of Drew Holiday, again, we know he can score, and he's a guy that when you need a shot, he can knock that shot down for you, inside or out. But for me, what I see from him is setting the tone defensively for this team. When he goes out and really starts playing really tough defense, where he's shutting a guy down, I think it almost becomes contagious for the entire team. Look, it was a total mismatch putting him up against LeBron James the other night. But again, that just goes to show you they really have no one on that roster they're willing to put up against LeBron James. You know, even a Zion at this point in his career, they don't want to put him obviously against LeBron James. Even saw at one point James kind of waiting, doing the isolation, saying, I'm going to take the young buck and I'm going to take him down low and go to the hole, and he did. But Holiday, to me, again, not just what he's doing in terms of his leadership, which again has been well documented, but what he does on the defensive side, I think really helps this team, because this team has the ability. They have players on this team that can play really good defense, but sometimes you almost got to get the well kind of primed and pumped a little bit to get them going.
Yeah, and a couple of things come to mind with Drew. He single-handedly turned around the Golden State game the other night in the third quarter.
Yep.
Probably more so offensively than defensively, but he definitely came out of the locker room, I think at the urging of Zion Williamson, who apparently said some things in the locker room about their effort. And then the other thing, they're playing Cleveland tomorrow night. They play Cleveland on January 28th up there. And what he did to Kevin Love was just unfair on the really defensive end. I mean, he just frustrated him so much with his defense. And he really does set a tone on the defensive end for them. And he is a clutch player for the most part, although sometimes his ball handling isn't the best down the stretch, but his scoring oftentimes is. One thing I'll say quickly about the turnovers, though, is, you know, Alvin Gentry has said there's a certain number of turnovers he can live with because of the pace they play. They're going to have more possessions. You're going to be aggressive. You're going to turn it over a little bit more. But they're going to have to, I think, take better care of the basketball, especially in the half court, or that could ultimately be the Achilles heel that wipes out a lot of this other positive stuff we've talked about. They've got to take a little bit better care of the basketball. I
agree with you. I said that as we started again after the All-Star break, that the one thing I needed to see was them, again, cut down on the turnovers. And really the live ball turnovers are the problem with this team right now, because they usually lead the baskets for the other team.
Yeah, and one thing, when you asked me about the former Lakers, Ingram, I didn't even get to him, but there's not much we need to say about Ingram except that, you know, I mean, obviously he's an all-star and he's worked out beautifully, and the only question is...
He's going to get a nice contract from the Pelicans coming up, because they didn't pick up his fifth-year option.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's... I think
his option, rather.
Right. So, yeah, the future's going to be, I think, bright for him in New Orleans. He seems to like it here, and he's flourishing. Yeah, you're talking about turnovers leading to. I mean, it's especially with the way they play. Yeah, it's almost like an automatic basket for the other team when they turn it over. So because the defenses can't get organized, and you know, the real critical point where you don't want to do that is especially at the end of close games. I mean, that's really where, you know, because the Pelicans do have players that are capable of stepping up their defense at the end of close games, and we've seen Drew win games defensively in the last couple minutes. So as long as they're taking care of the ball in those situations, that's really the crucial.
You know, guys, to me, the one guy they can ill afford to lose would be Derek Favors, because there's really nobody behind him that can do what he does. But in the same breath, you have to say again, what Zion has brought to this team, there's no one else on the floor that can do what he does as well.
Yeah, you know, I think I tweeted this the other night during one of the games out west, and I don't think I'm overstating it. And I understand when David Griffin said during the summer, this is Drew Holiday's team. I understand why he said that.
Yes,
I think he was sincere.
Absolutely. I agree.
And it was true. For most of the season, it was Brandon Ingram's team because he was scoring so much and everything revolved around him. I think it's Zion Williamson's team now.
Yes.
Everything they do offensively is predicated on what they're able to establish with him on the inside. He's a force on the defensive end, and there have been multiple occasions where he has been the one at 19 years old to light the fire under a team that didn't come with the proper energy to start the game. I just think the impact he has had and the way everything starts with him, I think he's definitely the most important player on the team.
Right, it's not necessarily fair for a GM to say it's his team before he's ever played a game.
Right.
But at this point, I would have to not only agree with that, but say that in about 18 years of covering the NBA now, I haven't seen a player in New Orleans who's capable of affecting the environment in a stadium like he is. And that's not a tangible thing.
Right.
But everything about the event feels different when he comes in the game. He can, you know, the crowd goes, there's so much anticipation for what he's going to do that, you know, for any other player, it would just be a putback and, you know, maybe a golf clap. You know what I mean? He gets his rebound and puts it back in, and the place goes wild because they just feel like he's done. He wants it. He's getting it done.
Right.
You know, he's the future, and so it seems to be a little bit contagious. And of course, yeah, I mean, I think the offense has to start with him because as long as he's able to get his shot, it's the highest percentage shot on the team. It's the most reliable scoring, and so they're going to have to make defenses take him away before they go to another option.
Yeah, and to both you guys' point, they're not running sets for him. A lot of the stuff, as Gentry has said, he is making on his own. He's getting a rebound. He's running the floor. Also, again, his basketball IQ is high. You see him on the floor getting the ball. You know, he could handle the ball, getting the ball out quickly, getting into a guy in a position to be able to score, and then, of course, spacing the floor so well because he attracts so much attention inside. The ability for these knockdown shooters to have open looks now.
He's also a willing and pretty good passer.
Yes.
And for a 19-year-old kid who's been told he's the biggest thing to come in the NBA since LeBron James, and have all this hype about him, and to have so much success right away, he could easily just go to the basket every single time the ball comes to him. But he senses a double team even before he can see it, and he gets rid of the ball. His basketball IQ is extremely high for a kid who's played 13 professional games.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And nothing. And both you guys have covered professional basketball since it's been in New Orleans the second time around. Have you seen anything like it? I mean, we've had a Baron Davis, we've had a Chris Paul, you've had an Anthony Davis, you've had former All-Stars like Mashburn. I don't think we've seen a player like this before.
No, the closest thing I think is Chris Paul, and the thing is, Chris's rookie year was Katrina. And his first two seasons were played primarily in Oklahoma City, so we didn't really have the same experience with him. But in 2008, when they had the team, and it wasn't just Chris, it was David West and Tyson Chandler.
Right.
When they took the Spurs to 7 games in the second round, CP3 was the guy who orchestrated all of that, and so that's the closest I can think of. But again, that was more of a collection of people than the individual. I think he kind of has set himself apart.
Yeah,
right.
and Peja Stojakovic was healthy and hitting a lot of
Yeah,
threes that year too.
that's right.
Correct.
But CP, I think, from his rookie season, because I still had to follow them from afar and then cover the few games they played in Louisiana. Byron Scott would always rave about his court awareness, you know, his understanding of what everybody on the floor was supposed to be doing and his ability to basically handle the ball and get people in the right position at the same time. By the time he was really hitting his stride in his third season when they came back here and had that good run. But the thing about Chris is, so Chris, you know, may have been ahead of Zion, maybe even in terms of basketball IQ in his rookie season, but Zion has just a very unique set of physical tools that nobody really has had since maybe Charles Barkley, but even then, not quite the same. So,
I would agree, no doubt. Guys, final question for you on the Pelicans. It looked as though Alvin Gentry was going to be shown the door at the end of the season now. You've had this incredible turnaround. There's a really good possibility this team makes the playoffs. Do they bring him back?
Well, at this point, I would have to say yes. You know, things can still change with 24 games, whether or not they make the playoffs. But I think, and this isn't the first time it's happened in his tenure, and I've never been the biggest supporter of his hiring, and he's a different type of coach than some X's and O's guys who are real hands-on. Like Brett talked about how he trusts his players and you know, and puts a lot of stock in how they police themselves, which is not invalid. It just, you have to have the right match of coach and players. And this is not the first time that a team has gone through bad times and turned it around and salvaged something from a season during his tenure, which tells me that the players still believe in him. And so at this point, I would have to say he will and should be back.
Brett?
Yeah, and as I alluded to before, I think that his ability to relate to players, even though, you know, he's getting up there in years and they're seem to be younger all the time.
Right,
I mean,
and we'll get younger within the next couple of seasons.
His ability to relate to players and treat them like pros and with respect, I think, causes them. You know, he's so personable. That's a huge asset. But you know, what he needs is a strong staff of people who can develop skills and call plays coming out of timeouts, because I still think that's an issue for them sometimes.
Yes.
But yeah, he was in a very unenviable position earlier, both last year at the end of the year and earlier this season. And he also has, I think, in David Griffin, an executive who has seen Alvin at his best in Phoenix, and maybe just believes that with the right conditions, Alvin can flourish like that again. And so that makes me inclined to believe that if they continue to improve as they have so far and make the playoffs, that he'll be back.
Yeah, I think it'll be tough to be able to move on from him, even though there's part of this fan base that, again, will never be behind Gentry, and it'll never change one way or the other. It just is what it is at this point. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest tonight, Brett Martel of the Associated Press, Les Seats of CrescentCitySports.com. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Quick word from our underwriters. We'll be right back. We'll talk some Saints. We'll get into some college basketball. We have time. We'll jump into some college baseball. Coming up next here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Don't move.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Les East of CrescentCitySports.com, Brett Martel, the Associated Press, on our panel. Guys, let's talk some Saints. Mickey Loomis spoke to the media today in Indianapolis. He anticipates a contract to be done with Drew Brees before March 13th, which is good news for the Saints. It's interesting to see again what this contract looks like. And I'll take you first, Les. What do you think it's going to be? 1 year deal, 2, 3 year deal with maybe again avoidable years in there so you can spread out the cap hit. $21 million in dead money still sitting out there for Brees. It's been an albatross that's been out there, been kicking down the can down the road for a long time now. What do you think happens?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I think there's a good chance that it will be a multiple year deal in some form or fashion, whether that includes options or buyouts, but I think in order to make financial sense, I think it could be multiple years, even though I don't think Drew's ready to commit to more than 1 year. I think he's pretty much said that. I have to believe that before he made his announcement that there probably had been some talk behind the scenes between his people and Mickey Loomis to kind of set the parameters to what this would look like if he did in fact come back. So I would think they have a pretty good idea and that they should be able to get it done within that time frame. And I don't think Mickey would have said that unless they had a pretty good idea of where they were headed. But exactly how they go with that, I'm not real sure. I'm not a capologist, but Mickey Loomis is pretty good at structuring this stuff. Although he does kick the can down the road a little bit, but that's oftentimes necessary to do what you need to do in the here and now.
It's the landscape of the NFL now. Again, you know, in terms of that, at some point you're going to have to eat that dead money. But as long as you have a team that you feel has a chance to be able to at least compete for a Super Bowl, you're willing to kick that can down the road. Your thoughts on Brees? How long he'll sign for, or how that contract may look?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be something that gives Drew, especially if he's willing to take less than market value, and it's my impression that he is willing to take a little less, not a lot. He still wants it to be a respectable thing that doesn't kind of undermine the market for quarterbacks, but probably somewhat of a hometown discount. In exchange, he wants a multi-year deal that gives him leverage if he wants to come back, if that makes sense. And if he wants to retire, then, you know, I guess people part ways on good terms. So, so that's, and then of course the benefit to the team for the multi-year deal is of course a lower cap hit.
Yes.
This year. So,
and with so many guys coming up over the next few years from those 3 great drafts that they've had, you know, you're gonna have to be able to figure out how to split the pie up. Taysom Hill, are you buying the heir apparent talk? Are you buying that they are going to split time in some form or fashion this year with Taysom under center playing quarterback while Brees is on the sidelines watching?
Well, I think it's possible. Yeah, I do think I think it's possible. I think that Drew is comfortable, a little more comfortable with that now. But the Saints kind of need that to happen to some extent to really see if Hill is the quarterback of the future, because it seems apparent to me that the Saints want him to be the quarterback of the future, even though he's already pushing 30. You know, it's like, I mean, quarterbacks are playing to the late 30s now, so you could easily be looking at like a 5 to 7 year starter at a very high level if he's able to turn the corner in the next couple of years. You know, by the time Drew leaves, so I do expect to see maybe a little more of Taysom in there. But I just don't know. I don't know. He hasn't proved really that he is the quarterback.
That was going to be, and I'll get a piggyback on that. Same question to you. You guys have seen him in practice, okay? That's pretty much the extent of everybody else has seen what he's been able to do in games. But again, no one is game planning for Taysom Hill as a starting quarterback. Nobody's out there. No defensive coordinator is going to take away what he does best. You're talking about longevity for a guy like Taysom Hill. You're not going to be the running quarterback at 32, 33, okay, because you have to learn how to be able to pass the ball out of the pocket. Are you buying heir apparent talk, and do you believe that there will be splitting of time this season where the GOAT goes to the sideline and Taysom takes a full series?
Well, I would rather see the GOAT go to the sideline than line up as a wide receiver.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure I get that part. But I wrote about this at Crescent City Sports the day that Drew made his announcement, and it's complicated, and I'm not sure they've worked all the way through it yet. No, I don't buy him as the heir apparent. I don't rule it out, but I think it's unlikely. I could see him getting a few more snaps next season as they continue to expand his role as they've done during his 3 years here so far. But the thing I wonder about is I just don't think they can make him the number 2 quarterback and continue to use him the way they've used him. And I think that's what they have to do. He has too much value in all these other roles that he has not to continue that and maybe continue to expand that. And if you do that, I don't think he can be the number 2 because you're risking injury with the other stuff he does. And he also, I just don't know that he can prepare for all of that and have the entire game plan as the number 2 quarterback instead of a particular package.
Yes.
So, I think there's a good chance that the number 2 quarterback is out there somewhere. And they're going to have to bring somebody in to be the number 2, assuming Teddy Bridgewater leaves, which is probable.
Right.
But I'm not 100% sure that'll happen. It depends on the market. But I think that's very likely that he leaves. And so they got to get the number 2 somewhere else, I think. And then, at some point, I could see him getting a veteran for a year or two while Drew is here, and then eventually drafting the heir apparent, although I don't think quarterback's going to be off their radar in the draft this year either.
To his point, you can't use him as a jack of all trades if he's going to be your number 2. So more than likely you're going to get a veteran number 2 at some point to come in, because we all got to believe that Teddy Bridgewater's going to leave for a better contract and an opportunity to start somewhere. With that said, if you get better along the offense in terms of weapons, you don't need to utilize Taysom Hill as a jack of all trades. If ultimately you get a solid number 2, number 3 receiver, if you get, you've got the players plugged into what you're plugging him in now, and in some cases out of necessity.
Well, and part of me wonders whether it's possible to have kind of a number 2 and a 2A, in a sense where they, they're trying to see how Taysom can do in a more conventional quarterback role, even though he's not the full-time backup to Drew because he has to play these other positions.
Yes.
The other irony about Taysom's career is that he was so injured in college as a full-time quarterback, and now he comes into the NFL playing these positions where he is asked to be more physically aggressive, and maybe because he's literally on the offensive physically, he's less vulnerable to taking these awkward hits where his eyes are somewhere else and he's getting hit at the same time or something. So so he's been. I mean, he's been.
Well, he initiates the blow in a lot of cases.
Right. So
where again, as a quarterback, you're kind of sitting back to your point, kind of like a sitting duck. Guys, I think we've all kind of talked about Bridgewater. He's probably going to end up elsewhere. Let's talk about Alvin Kamara for a moment, because he's in the last year of his deal. Unless the Saints have something going right now where they're going to extend him, more than likely there's going to be at least talk that he may hold out, may not. But can you even put a number on Kamara in terms of how you're going to pay him going forward when you look at what running backs are making, and then the de-emphasis of the running backs within the NFL right now?
First of all, one quick thing about the quarterbacks, and I'll get to Alvin, is just a name that occurred to me that maybe we should keep an eye on in free agency is Chase Daniel. He's a free agent once again.
Great point.
But as far as Alvin, I think they have to be very leery about doing anything long-term with him right now because he got hurt last year. Sean Payton said late in the year that he was healthy and he wasn't that effective late in the year. And Sean Payton has always been at the forefront of being able to find running backs who can be extremely productive without having to get a big-name free agent or use a first-round draft pick. So as good as Alvin Kamara is, and he is really good, I don't think he would be all that difficult to replace if they plan for this. So I think they have to wait and see if he stays healthy next year and how he performs next year. I think they're going to hold off on doing anything long-term with him until they see how he does next season.
Yeah, I mean, he can't be paid like Michael Thomas because he's not, even though he's able to contribute in the receiving game, he's not a receiver.
Right.
Running backs are more injury prone. He's not the biggest, strongest running back out there. He is very slippery and has been good at avoiding contact. And he did have some great games last year, but it arguably was his worst of his first 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And his health probably had a little bit to do with that. So I'm with Les. I think the Saints have to be careful in their approach to him. They don't want to lose him. I do expect him to hold out.
Right.
Because I think he feels like he has to maximize whatever leverage he has. And holdouts, even if they last into training camp, they haven't always been that big of a deal with the Saints. Sean Payton doesn't get too worked up about it, and especially with players who really know what to do. In some respects, it lessens their exposure to fluky, non-contact injuries.
Right.
So, I would expect a holdout from Kamara. I just don't know how long it'll last or if it'll become acrimonious because of the Saints' apprehension about, breaking the bank to keep him.
And of course, Clutch Sports now, his agent joined ranks with Clutch Sports, and we know how that worked out with Mickey Loomis and of course the Lakers in the Anthony Davis deal. Guys, new CBA has been proposed. The Management Council for the NFL, the owners have approved it. The Management Council for the NFLPA, they've approved it. It goes to the players now. 17 regular season games, expanding the playoffs. There'll be a little bit more of a revenue share with the players. They'll get an additional $5 billion over the 10-year lifespan of the deal. Your thoughts on the deal, and do you think the deal will be ratified by the players?
Well, that's a good question because you had the player committee negotiate this deal and then postpone presenting it to the entire union. So obviously there was some backlash. J.J. Watt was not quiet about his thoughts about it. And so they held off and then eventually voted to present it to the entire membership. So I don't think the players are united on this by any means. So it remains to be seen. I think ultimately, if you have more regular season games and more playoff games, which is also part of what they're talking about, you're going to have more TV money. And so it'll get done because there's more money. But I don't think, especially when and I'm all in favor of scaling back on the preseason. I'm not sure about the 17-game schedule. An odd number creates a lot of complications there in terms of uniformity. And then as far as the playoffs, so was there anybody out there last year saying, you can't have a Super Bowl without including the Steelers and the Rams? No. I mean, you have teams in the playoffs right now that aren't that great. You're only going to dilute it even more.
Yeah, it's all about revenue. It's about that extra game. That's what it's coming down to.
Yeah, I think it risks diluting the product. But as far as, my understanding is that the proposal that was out there was done, actually the NFLPA was in favor of a lot of some of these proposals that were designed to help the rank and file players.
Right.
Expanding
the practice squads. Okay, which I'm surprised they didn't expand the regular rosters. That's the thing that kind of blew my mind because I expected, 60, 65-man rosters now with everybody being available on game day. That just didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, and maybe the idea is that it's cheaper to expand the practice squads because they get paid by the week and there's a little more flexibility with it. But you can still kind of activate right away somebody who's ready if you have injury problems. It's interesting that, I think the star players are very much against playing an extra game without being compensated. I mean, they lose the most under the proposal,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's one more game where they're exposed to getting hurt, and then their massive earning potential can be undermined by something like that. Yeah. Because they're doing something for the greater good, I guess, of the NFLPA. I think what the star players are saying is that maybe just, you can have 17 games and we should have a greiter percentage of overall league revenues since we're the product.
Well, they want to get to 50% like the NBA.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their goal.
Right.
They're, I think, at 48.7 if they ratify this.
So.
Say they get to 50%, where the owners are saying, wait a minute, we're the owners, and we want to keep the majority of the revenue. Interesting to see how that kind of plays out. Guys, let's switch to basketball. Just going to make a quick comment here. Tulane winners, 2 of their last 3. They're 12-16 in the AAC. They're 4-12. They look like they're going to end up in last place in the AAC. So Ron Hunter better get his wetsuit ready for the Lake Pontchartrain. UNO having a really tough season right now with a lot of injuries. They are 8-19, 4-13 in the conference. They're 3 games back from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, who they lost to a couple games back. To make the tournament, make the Southland tournament, you have to finish above the final 4, the bottom 4, and they're not going to finish. They're going to finish at the bottom here, so that they're out of both teams are out of postseason play. The LSU Tigers are not, although they're in a free fall. They are 19-9 now, 10-5 in the SEC. They're in 4th place with a 3rd place tie with Florida. But Florida, obviously based on last night, will move ahead of them. Lose a 5 of their last 7. And they've been exposed a bit over this last 7 games in the conference, to the point that, again, I get the feeling that Will Wade has now looked at as, instead of that genius coach, as a guy that's complaining a little bit too much right now and not focusing on, again, getting his team ready to go. Now, look, they got issues. They got lack of size. They don't have a tremendous amount of depth, especially with Charles Manning Jr. going out again. But the problem has been the defensive rotations. Guys hitting the boards, which they need to do as a team, but leaving guys open for wide open shots. And teams know this now. They have a book on LSU. And it seems since Vandy, every single team is using that blueprint to be able to either beat LSU or take LSU to the wire.
Yeah, they were exposed by a team that was 0-8 in the conference.
Yes.
I think Will Wade probably had the best assessment a week or 2 ago when he said we probably weren't as good as we looked during the 10-game winning streak, and probably not quite as bad as we look right now. Although the more this goes on, the more you wonder about the second part. But yeah, they're giving up offensive rebounds, which is a byproduct of not being very big. And they are giving up way too many three-point shots. I believe during this stretch they've had 3 losses where they scored 90 or more points. So the points they're giving up with second chance points and three-pointers is just untenable. Now they do have, their last 3 games are against teams with losing records in the conference.
Yes.
They have to beat Texas A&M on Saturday.
Right.
He's only 2 games behind them in the standings. And then I think they go to Arkansas,
they go out Arkansas
and they play Georgia,
and then Georgia at home.
So they have to win at least 2 of those 3, or they're going to really have some pressure on them in the SEC tournament. But I just don't think this team is that good, and I think they raised the expectations to an unrealistic level by getting so hot in the middle of the season. And I think they're somewhere between the 2 extremes, which makes them an NCAA bubble team, which they're not yet, but they're getting very close to being.
Yeah. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know the last game I covered with LSU was against Kentucky in Baton Rouge, and their lack of size definitely hurt them in that game. They had a lot of shots that were blocked. Kentucky was, I think, shooting about 31% or so in the first half and still had a 1-point lead because they were able to shut down LSU. And then as soon as Kentucky started making shots in the second half, they kind of pulled away.
I think it was 7-9 from three-point land in the second half.
Yeah. And so they were leading comfortably most of the second half because of that. LSU made a little bit of a run to try to get back in it, but you really never felt like it was realistic. So, yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, I think, is that they just had a lot of really timely performances. You know, guys stepping up at the end of close games, and I mean, if you look at their winning streak, very few of those games were lopsided victories anyway.
Right.
I think they're a really feisty, competitive team, and a lot of their losses have been close too. And sometimes the season kind of, goes in waves like this, where you have a good run of form, and then some disappointments.
The problem for LSU is, again, a very weak non-conference schedule, okay? And then now, when the committee is looking to see how you're going to finish, they're not finishing well, which means, again, to your point, you got to get the last three, at least two of the last three, but you got to get the last three. You know, it's going to put you over the 20-win mark, okay, which is going to help. And then, again, depending on if you get the double bye or not, you know, when you go in the SEC tournament, you have to win one or two there. Now, again, if you look at the seeding right now, they're still you know, they're still in the NCAA tournament. But you never know what's going to happen, because remember, you have other teams that are on the bubble now. If they start to win, that LSU again continues on this downward spiral. It may put them in a position where they're going to be, you know, a top seed in the NIT and not a low seed in the NCAA.
And that double bye is a double-edged sword.
Yes.
In that if you need a win or two in the tournament, first of all, you have fewer games, and secondly, your first game is probably against a better team.
You're going to feast on those teams, right?
Yeah. So you know, I'm not sure winning two of the last three and not getting a double bye might not be helpful to them, and they can get another win in the SEC tournament and, you know, have a
help the resume,
because you're right, their non-conference schedule is not very good.
Right.
What's the best game? VCU, and they lost that.
Yeah.
And so
I think Utah State was ranked when they beat them. I think they're like 14th.
So I don't know. I don't know if they're an NCAA tournament team.
Right.
We'll find out. They have at least 4 more games to play, and that will tell us whether they're an NCAA team. They're there, but they're very close to not being there.
Guys, final question on LSU, and we only got about 2 minutes. We got a minute and a half left. So, do you think the investigation from the NCAA is over? We've been hearing there may be a letter going out to all these schools that were implicated in the Yahoo article. Do you think it's over?
I don't think it's over, but I think there's a pecking order, and that the you know, the investigators with the NCAA are kind of taking their time and building cases against a certain number of schools first. And I don't know if LSU is necessarily their priority right now, but they'll probably get to them eventually.
Right. You got the final word.
I agree with that. I don't think it's over, and yet I don't think LSU is the one that's primarily in their sights.
Right.
So, but I think we will hear more about this down the road.
What's interesting is last year the entire LSU nation came to the defense of Will Wade because of how this team was playing. This team is not playing at that same standard this year. I wonder how many people are going to be standing behind Will Wade if that happens this time around.
Yeah, it's harder to defend him when he's not winning the SEC championship.
Yep, no doubt about it. Brett Martel, the Associated Press, Les East of CrescentCitySports.com. Thanks for being on our panel tonight. Both award-winning journalists. Great to have them on our panel tonight. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. Also, Pelican Sports Television every Friday night, 9 o'clock, Pelican Sports Television. We post it on our social media pages. Also, again, at ericasher.com and the WLAE-TV YouTube channel as well. You catch me on the radio, Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2, and the iHeartRadio app. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. All the previous episodes, as mentioned, of this show are at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks to our underwriters. We appreciate those underwriters supporting this program. Also, the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Naila Jones, Alex Chacon, and my director, William Hill. For Brett Martel and also Les East, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.